Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Queer Magic, LGBT plus Spirituality and Culture from Around the World by Tomás Prower. Narrated by Boehmer. Embarkation. If all the world's a stage, then identity is nothing but a costume. Mark Jacobs. What makes a man a man? What makes a woman a woman? Is a man someone with facial hair who is tall, strong, aggressive, and sexually attracted to females? Could be. But then again, we all know some men who aren't. Is a woman someone who wears makeup and is petite, family-oriented, gentle, and sexually attracted to males? Sometimes, yeah. But we all know some women who aren't. So maybe the answer has something to do with science. Our biology must be what defines and divides the genders, right? A man is a human with an X and a Y chromosome, and a woman is a human with two X chromosomes. But still, this doesn't seem to fully satisfy our question, does it? After all, what about the people with XXY chromosomes? Plus, modern medicine and surgical advances allow a male to biologically become a female and a female to biologically become a male. So then, is being a male the definition of being a man, and being a female the definition of being a woman? Well, what would your answer be? Go ahead and think of your response. You don't have to say it out loud. To you, what makes a woman and a man a man? Now, let's take it a step further. If you had lived 100 years ago, would your answer be the same? 500 years ago? 1,000 years ago? What if you had been born into another culture, in another religion, in another country? You see, the concept of what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman is not, has not, and never will be set in stone. Interesting, isn't it? But perhaps you're thinking, what does defining men and women have to do with our magical tribe of LGBT plus people throughout the globe and throughout time? A lot, really. I mean, let's take the acronym apart and look at those letters individually. Lesbians are women who are sexually attracted to women. Gays are men who are sexually attracted to men. Bisexuals are either men or women who are attracted to both men and women. Transgender individuals are people who were born as one sex and transitioned into another, and the list goes on, including queer and intersex individuals and more. But if our sexual and gender identities are based upon us being men or women who are attracted to men and or women, and we already established that what defines men and women varies from culture to culture and from era to era, then how can we, with absolute unchanging certainty, define the LGBT plus community currently or at any point in history? Or, for that matter, how can we define the sexual and gender identities of the all-powerful, omnipresent, immortal gods with these limiting labels? So far, I've just thrown a bunch of questions at you and played devil's advocate a bit without giving any solid answers. But that's where this book comes in. Like you, I've had a lot of questions, not just about the world, but about myself, my sexuality, my identity, and my spirituality. From an early age, I knew I was attracted to men, but did that mean I wasn't a man? Anyone who knew me never would have labeled me a woman, because I was too manlike in my behavior, but still, I didn't seem to act like other men anyone knew. and nobody seemed to act like me. What was I? I felt like I didn't belong, and I just wanted to get away. Not in some nihilistic sense, but I wanted to go out and explore the world, to find my tribe. I wanted to go beyond my Irish-Mexican heritage and Catholic school bubble and find the answers that I knew I couldn't find at home. Of course, being a teenager, economically dependent upon my parents, I couldn't just get up, quit school, and go on a globe-trekking adventure. So I had to use what was available. Books, specifically non-fiction books, served as my map to finding my tribe. Within the pages of non-scholastic history books, especially religious myths from around the world, were tales of otherness that contained sexualities and genders of which I had never heard. The more I learned about my queer tribe of others that was spread throughout the ages and the globe in so many religious traditions and spiritual beings, the more I realized how vast and diverse our tribe is. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender are just a small handful of the flavors under the umbrella of queerness that have existed in our history and religious traditions on every inch of land on the earth. And therein was the inspiration for this book. Throughout history, in every part of the globe and in every spiritual plane, are members of our tribe. Had schools taught queer world history or queer religious studies, so much more of my youth would have been soothed and comforted in knowing that I wasn't alone in both community and spirit. This is the book that contains all the information I wish someone had given me when I began my quest. Because what good is knowledge if it isn't shared and acted upon? So, here for you all is my collected knowledge and research about our tribe of queer humans and gods, as well as the magical ways our queer brothers and sisters interact with these queer gods. For easy reference and flow of listening, I have mapped out our global expedition into 7 parts that'll be our ports of call, each spotlighting a specific region of the world. These parts are further divided into chapters, each focusing upon a specific religious culture from the region. And because you cannot truly separate the human experience from spirituality, or spirituality from the human experience, the first half of each chapter will illuminate the hidden queer history of each cultural tradition, followed by a quick takeaway summary on how to implement the tradition's queer wisdom into our own everyday queer lives and spell work. The second half of each chapter will focus on the queer deities, legendary figures and mythic lore of the tradition, along with their appropriate correspondences and devotional preferences when applicable. But with that in mind, I highly discourage you from immediately and arbitrarily incorporating these cultures and deities into your personal practice, just because of capricious curiosity. Eclectic spirituality and cosmopolitanism are one thing, but appropriation and lack of cultural reverence are another. Yes, many of these queer traditions and deities from around the world will call to you and speak to you on some intrinsic level, but do personal research before jumping into foreign waters. Here's a parallel example of what I mean. Growing up Catholic, I can tell you that if someone one day read a book on Catholicism and suddenly decided to pray that the Virgin Mary be the intercessor of manifesting their prayers, not only are they not really a Catholic, but they also really don't know what they are doing or the significance and meaning behind why Catholics do that. Does that mean no one can practice Catholicism who wasn't born into it? Absolutely not. But it does mean that anyone interested in truly practicing Catholicism should go beyond that one book, do their own personal research, talk with members of the community, and find out the appropriate reasons why and how Catholics do what they do. The same is true for all other religions and faiths found in this book. This is a tour of all the queer options out there for our community. What resonates with you deserves your time for more in-depth, independent research before jumping into their magic. To help us with this, since it is a book for the community, I felt it should be a communal effort. And so, in closing each chapter, I have invited a special guest from the worldwide queer community to share a little something for us all. Some will share their personal experience growing up and being queer in a particular culture or religion, and others will share queer-focused spells, prayers, meditations, and cultural exercises from their tradition. This kind of queer communal gathering of wisdom, magic, and personal experiences is truly a blessing of our time. Throughout history, our voices had been silenced, our people ignored, and our gods and practices normalized to fit the social mores of times gone by. But the times, they are always a-changin', and humanity is always progressing to become more socially inclusive and better than we once were. For example, in this book you'll hear a lot of things from the past that you may not agree with, and some of them, rightly so, in particular the antiquated practice of homo- and heterosexual erotic partnering of adults and youths. Nowadays, we have a higher value and empathy for children and childhood in general, and we have almost universally stopped the social acceptance of such horrid practices in this day and age. But to ignore these terrible practices of the past as if they never happened is not to learn from them. So, as you listen to this book, know that what was once socially acceptable in a certain place at a certain time has to be acknowledged, but it doesn't have to be condoned or practiced today, especially if it is illegal. Also, you might notice a bit of imbalanced queer representation in this book. I have tried my best, with the historical information and research available to me now in the 21st century, to find as much info on our tribe's spiritual lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgender individuals, and every other flavor of queerness. But for most of recorded history, almost everywhere, the lives of women were seen as so unimportant that they didn't merit to be mentioned in historical records. Because of this patriarchy throughout the ages, there exists less information available on females than there is on males. Compounding this, historians' favoritism of men and modern queer researchers' focus on gay men in particular have left us with a disproportionately larger amount of info on the G of the LGBT plus community than any of the other letters. Still, I have endeavored to give representation for everyone in this book as much as is available. There is something for everybody. And lastly, for practical purposes, I will use the term LGBT plus to refer to the entire spectrum of queer gender/sexuality/identity. Different people spell that acronym differently. GLBT, LGBTQ, GLBTQI, and so on. But each form seems limited, since there is an innumerable amount of subtle shades of gender/sexuality/identity that can and do exist. So, to keep things uniform, I will utilize the most well-known acronym of LGBT and add a plus next to it to signify the seemingly infinite spectrum of queerness. In addition to saving time and space, thus making the book physically shorter and therefore less expensive, this seems the most fair, practical, and inclusive way to refer to our community. As we head out on our global expedition in search of our queer tribe, both human and divine, stay close and keep an open mind. It'll be your passport to worlds you never knew existed, populated by people and spiritual beings just like you, regardless of who you are. All aboard? Our first port of call in the Middle East is just around the corner. Part 1. Greater Middle East. I, you, he, she, we. In the garden of mystic lovers, these are not true distinctions. Rumi. Since our earliest days, the Middle East has been the crossroads of the world, where cultures, religions, and ideas collide. The desert sands and fertile floodplains of the region saw the birth of humankind's earliest civilizations and monotheism. Known to many cultures as the center of the world, it is the origin of three of the modern world's most widespread religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. While we're here, we'll focus more on Judaism and Islam. We'll save Christianity for when we reach Europe, wherein it truly took hold and became synonymous with European culture. Today, the Middle East and North Africa are strongly Islamic. Since World War II, Judaism has seen a fevered resurgence in the area, with the recent creation of the State of Israel carved from Palestinian lands. Through it all, though, in this place where the topic of religion is as hot and as changing as the sands they were built upon, LGBT+ leaders and events have had their place in every faith. But let's start at the beginning and discuss the queer contributions of our first urban ancestors who established civilizations on the Tigris, Euphrates, and Nile rivers millennia ago. Chapter 1. Cradles of Civilization. Cultural. Mesopotamia. Around the 4th millennium BCE, the peoples in Mesopotamia and Egypt gradually stopped their nomadic ways of life as hunter-gatherers and began to settle. The floodplains of the Tigris, Euphrates, and Nile rivers were ideal for agriculture, and with the domestication of animals and edible plants, and the invention of granaries in which to store surplus foodstuffs, humans began to grow their own sustenance in a reliable manner. With food in abundance assured by dedicated farmers, it was no longer necessary for everyone to focus their lives on obtaining food for the community, which thus led to the creation of diversified talents, skills, and careers such as masonry, astrology, pottery, military, and bronze working, the combination of everyone's unique skills contributing to the greater good of the whole of society and the peace necessary to maintain this intricate society, became known as civilization. One specialized career that held great prominence in these ancient empires of the Middle East was the priesthood. For the first time in human history, people could dedicate their entire lives to the study of the divine and its mysteries, since other people were now laboring to supply the food and drink for all. Their initial insights into the nature of the divine included many gods and goddesses that we would nowadays label as queer. In Mesopotamia, a number of civilizations rose and fell, but their idea of the cosmos and of the divine were quite similar to one another. While not exactly the same, these various empires often retold similar mythological stories within their own cultural context. While collectively known as Mesopotamian, these peoples are known to the world today as Sumerians, Phoenicians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. A commonality among many of these Mesopotamian civilizations was their belief in the spirituality of third-gender individuals. In Akkad and Babylon, Ishtar, called Inanna among the Sumerians, was the goddess of fertility, love, sex, and war, and she was known to magically feminize her male priests, known as Kurgaru and Asinu, during ritualized possession ceremonies. Some of the male priests who became vessels for the goddess were known to remain forever feminine in mind and manner, while still some others subsequently castrated themselves so as to become a physically feminized vessel to better receive Ishtar. Another example of priestly queerness comes from the Sumerian mythologies of Enki, god of mischief, creation, bodies of water, intelligence, and craftspeople. As legend goes, Enki created a special class of androgynous priests, known as the Gala, as a gift to the goddess Inanna. Their dedicated purpose was to sing soul-soothing laments to the goddess, a position usually reserved for women. They were known as being gender-fluid and ranged the spectrum on sexual orientation. Some were androgynous biological females, some were biological males who adopted female names, some were homosexuals, and so on. In fact, in their native script, the word Gala is a portmanteau of penis and anus, an obvious nod to the widely acknowledged gay homosexuality of the male priests. The Sumerian creation myth shows another link between Enki and non-binary beings. According to the tale, in addition to men and women, the goddess of creation and mountains, Ninmah, created an additional gender comprised of women who were biologically barren and individuals who had neither male nor female genitalia. Enki took a liking to this other gender and bestowed upon them the sacred positions of priestesses, known as Naditu, and servants to royalty, known as Gursakau. In the Akkadian version of this myth, it was Enki himself who requested that this third gender of humans be specifically created and called the Galu, also known as the Gala. As opposed to priestesses and royal servants, however, the Akkadian Galu were hellish demons who acted as psycho-pomps to the underworld. These third-gender Galu play a small yet prominent role in the legendary Descent of the Goddess myth from a Sumerian poem. In brief, the story is about how the goddess Inanna descends into the underworld to console her older sister, Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, who is mourning the death of her husband. While down there, Inanna is imprisoned by Ereshkigal. Enraged by Inanna's imprisonment, Enki sends his loyal Galu to rescue her, but they arrive too late, as Ereshkigal had already murdered her little sister. Nevertheless, the crafty Galu see that Ereshkigal is in agony. Some versions say due to labor pains, others due to guilt from killing her sister, and so they overtly show compassion for the panicked murderess. Soothed by their sympathy, Ereshkigal promises to give them a gift of their choosing, in which the Galus select Inanna's corpse as the gift. The Galu revive Inanna, thus allowing her to escape from the underworld. Aside from the leisure that civilization provided to the pursuit of mysticism, the codification of laws was another advantage that arose with the development of urban societies in Mesopotamia. With so many people living together, there had to be set guidelines on what was and was not permissible, as well as punishment and reparation for damages done. One of the earliest code of laws in human history came to be known as the Code of Hammurabi. In his code of laws, the Babylonian king Hammurabi established progressive judicial theory for the times, such as the accused's presumption of innocence, the necessity of evidence to garner a conviction, and the regulation of preset punishments that befit the crime. While fascinating from a jurisprudence standpoint, the Code of Hammurabi is worthy of note in our travels here because it makes no mention of homosexual acts. In fact, no Mesopotamian legal systems lay out standards or punishments for queerness. Since it can be safely assumed that LGBT plus individuals and activities were happening in these heavily populated urban centers of early civilization, LGBT plus actions and propensities were either a non-issue to be addressed in codes of law, or simply not seen as negative or harmful to society. Modern Mesopotamian scholars now generally believe that these early civilizations saw sexuality as far too natural to write about, let alone regulate through laws. Nevertheless, in the legal codes of Middle Assyria, two ancient laws directly mention homosexuality, and though it's mentioned in a negative light, the reason for punishment is not homosexuality itself if we read between the lines. In brief, the first law dictates that flogging, fines, and castration shall be the punishment for anyone who spreads unsubstantiated rumors of a man who goes around letting other men have sex with him. In this context, the criminal act is technically slander and defamation of character for essentially calling a man a slut, to use modern slang. The second law dictates that if a man forces himself upon another man, the punishment will be for the aggressor to be physically forced upon and then castrated. In this context, the criminal act and punishment is technically rape. Mesopotamian takeaway: divine queerness. Now it's time for our first takeaway lesson/activity. Unlike the larger rituals and stories that our special guests will share, these cultural takeaways will serve as short, immediate things you can adapt and implement into your own queer daily life and magical practices right away. It's amazing to discover how widespread and disproportionately high our queer ancestors were represented in the priestly classes of Mesopotamian society. Making this more impactful is how these are some of the earliest civilizations in human history. This shows that our earliest urban ancestors oftentimes saw queer individuals as especially able to have a connection to the divine. Since queerness was a preeminent quality for the clergy at a time when the clergy was intricately tied with magic and special knowledge, it shows that we, as LGBT plus people, have always been seen as magical, special beings. Our inability to perfectly fit in with those around us just might signify that it's because we are better suited as dual citizens of the physical and spiritual worlds. So, for your first magical activity, take time in meditation to discover how your queerness gives you a unique insight and outlook within your own magical tradition. Embrace not fully fitting in, and see what kind of uniqueness you can add to your tribe thanks to your divine differentness. Like the ancient Mesopotamians, own your queerness within your own tradition and know that since earliest history, the world has seen a unique magic within us. It's time you see it within yourself. Ancient Egypt. This is going to be a controversial leg of our global expedition. You see, when it comes to the ancient Egyptians' views on homosexuality and queer culture, there is practically no direct information about it in their writings and art. There is some talk about it in their mythology, but we'll save that for later. For now, we're looking at the day-to-day culture of LGBT plus persons in ancient Egypt. Unlike a people's physiology or diet, sexuality leaves no trace behind for us to examine. Without direct written or artistic evidence, Egyptologists can only guess the ancients' attitudes based upon a mix of vague, indirect evidence and personal bias, depending upon what the researcher is trying to affirm or disprove. One of the best places to discover a society.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?